How's everybody doing? Today I'm working on my daughter's 2005 Scion TC, doing brake work on it. I'm not a mechanic, but I looked at other YouTube videos online, and I figured I might as well shoot some video as I'm going along, and maybe it'll help others. I usually do my own brake work. Sometimes I'll have the dealer do it. In this case, it needed pads, rotors, and the calipers are frozen. Haven't had this car too long, but it's what was on it when we bought it. Car's got about 205,000 miles on it at this point. So anyway, this won't be a perfect tutorial by any means, but maybe it'll be helpful to some. So have the tire off already. I already took most of the stuff off the driver's side. So this is the passenger side, and just show you real quick where certain things need to be removed and taken apart. If you're doing this work, especially if you are doing the caliper, I wasn't sure on that. Most cars I've ever done have pretty much just needed rotors and pads, never calipers. So, but here's the basics. So what we have here, obviously, so we got the caliper here. It's a two-piece caliper. The main caliper itself, which holds all the fluid reservoir. Sorry about that, I zoomed in by accident. And then you have kind of what they call, I guess, the mounting bracket piece. So it's two pieces. This piece comes off, leaving this piece, which has the pads mounted into it. It also has the guide pins, which need to be lubed. On the driver's side, which I already took apart, not only was the caliper piston pretty much frozen, but the guide pins on the mounting bracket were also completely frozen up. And you can get those out and clean them up, but in my case, you know, I'm buying the main piece of the caliper anyway to replace. To get one that has two pieces, both the mounting bracket and the caliper itself, was only maybe $10 or $15 more to get this whole bracket as well. So that's what I'll be replacing it with. As far as so what we need to do to get this all taken apart, if you are doing your caliper, first thing you're gonna need to do is disconnect your main brake line going in. You can see it here. Goes to the back of the caliper itself, and right there is what's called a Banjo Bolt, I believe. That comes off. That is a I think that's a 14 millimeter socket to get that off. Now this Banjo Bolt has a hole in it which allows the brake fluid to go into the caliper. So when you do disconnect that line, you're going to get some fluid both dripping out of the caliper reservoir and from the brake line itself. All I did after I removed it was covered it up with some tin foil and kind of closed it off the best I could. It dripped for a little while. I just had a catch bucket underneath it on the other side. Eventually it stopped. But you want to watch your fluid reservoir up in your engine compartment. If you do that, make sure if you are dripping that it doesn't run dry. Keep adding a little bit to it as you go along. So first you'll disconnect that. Then at that point, once you get the hose up and out of the way, by the way, there's a get a light here. You have a bolt. If you follow the hose up, there is a mounting bracket for the hose up above, and there's a bolt there as well, which you could undo, and that'll give you a little bit more play with the brake line itself if you need it. So you could undo that. Once you have the brake line disconnected, you can then remove the two bolts that hold the main piece of the caliper on. Those are also going to be 14 millimeter bolts, and those are here and down here. once you take those out, you'll be able to take this whole main piece off, and this is mine from the other side, and that's going to come off. You can see how terrible condition my previous one was. That's the hole where the banjo bolt goes in, and that's going to be filled with brake fluid. You're going to want to dump out into some sort of container as soon as you disconnect it. Once you get this off, at that point you could take the mounting bracket which holds the pads off as well. That's this piece right here. I already removed the pads from it. That's from the driver's side. That is 2 bolts which are down farther inside. You could kind of see it glistening there. Those are both 17 millimeters. There's one there, and then trying to reach back here. There's the other one there. Once you have those removed, you should be able to shimmy off the mounting bracket. By the way, the main caliper piece, if it's frozen, you're probably not going to be able to move it anyway or push in the piston. But if it is, you should be able to kind of shimmy it back and forth, eventually get it off. It took a couple minutes on my first one. So at that point, you'll have basically everything off. And if you're doing your rotor, you'll at that point be able to pull off the rotor. It might be frozen on there. My first one was really frozen on there. Ended up having to hit it with a sledgehammer. Just hitting it from the back with a sledgehammer wasn't enough. I also had to hit it kind of on an angle, like here and like here, coming in from the side. And you know, where it's seized could be on the back, and this whole area right in here will kind of look like it's fused together at first until you knock it free. But there's other ways to get them free. These rotors don't have it, but sometimes they'll have a little screw hole where you could screw in like a bolt, which screws in and then pushes off the back and will pop it right off. There's some other ways too. If you just search for you know, how to get a stuck rotor off, there's plenty of videos and tutorials on that. It'll come off eventually. So that's it. Some of these bolts may be on there pretty tight. I sprayed a little WD-40 on them ahead of time, which helps. But almost always I end up needing some sort of leverage bar, like a breaker bar. So I just use a regular socket, and then I have this pipe that I put over the end of the socket, and I'm able to get a lot of leverage and break all those bolts free and take everything off. I think that's about it. So if I think of anything else, I will come back. Otherwise, I'll probably shoot some video when I'm putting it all together. Quickly here, you could just see the driver's side, which I had already taken apart. So you could see what's left once everything's removed. I have the brake line just kind of like tied off up there and covered with tin foil. Okay, one other thing just to mention. So this is that mounting bracket I was talking about. The pads slip right into here. They've already been removed from this one. But I also mentioned the guide pins, which are right here. There's 2 of them on this. There's a rubber boot here, and then this would be the pin, and these are the old ones. And if this was functioning normally and, you know, up to spec, this piece right here, which I'm pulling on really hard with my fingers, should just slide in and out. This rubber boot would kind of like an accordion would expand out and then go back in with it, and they would both be that way. but these are completely seized up. If I put a socket on this, I can turn it. And there's videos on YouTube of some real diehards getting these out, even in this condition, and then kind of sanding them down and cleaning out the insides where the pin goes in, and relubing them and being able to reuse them. In my case, I forget if I mentioned this, but I could buy my calipers two ways. Either just the main caliper piece or the caliper and the bracket, which is all of this. These are remanufactured, but all ready to go, with these being completely redone for another $10-15. So that's the route I'm going. Normally, if you were changing these and they're in good condition, if you're just doing the pads or whatever, you want to pull these out and relube them. You could use brake lubricant. I did read somewhere that they recommend using the silicone type is better in this case. It's only what I read or saw on a video. But you do want to relube those and clean them up. There are kits, hardware kits you could get for to replace these boots, and also the pins themselves. They're probably about $15. But like I said, you could also just replace the whole thing all at once for pretty close to the same money without all the effort to redo it. Alright, I'm back. So I have since done the complete front driver side, everything, disc, pads, and caliper. So I still have the passenger side here to do now. So far all I've done is I've put the new rotor on, and just to hold it kind of in place, I put two of the lug nuts back on temporarily, and I'll take those off once everything's put together, and then put the wheel back on. So all I have on is the rotor. Here's my replacement caliper. It's a complete caliper that has the caliper itself and the mounting bracket, some places call it, but basically what holds the brake pads in there. So that's it. See on it, here's your brake bleeder valve. That's always going to go to the top, so if you're wondering like which caliper goes on which side, this particular one actually has a right for right side of the car, which would be passenger. The other one had an L on it. The ones I took off the car did not have L and R on them. But anyway, just think of the bleeder valve always going towards the top, because that's where the air is going to go. So if you mount them and your bleeder valves on the bottom, that would be wrong, and you have them reversed. Here is the Banjo Bolt that goes in, and that's where this is going to unscrew, and my brake line is going to reattach there. Note that it came with two, I assume they're brass, maybe they're copper washers. So the actual brake line hose is going to go in between those, so you're going to have one on each side of it, and then that will crank down. These are your guide pins. So these are, since I got this new, I'm sorry, this is remanufactured, but since it's all redone, those all have new fittings, new boots, those accordion type rubber pieces there. The one I actually got first was from the shop was nicked. I didn't notice it until I expanded it. Luckily I saw it, or else it probably would have seized pretty fast. So I had to return it and wait another day to get a new one. But those are going to be what should be able to slide freely in and out when you pull the two pieces away from each other, the caliper and the mounting bracket. So if you're reusing an old one, those should move back and forth freely. I only have one hand here. Let me see if I could do it. Yeah, so with one hand I could pull those apart, and then
squeeze it back together. It's just hard to do with one hand. But see how freely that moves? If yours can't do that and you're reusing it, then you either need to take it apart and clean it out. Well, there's some YouTube videos about that, on how to do that. It's pretty tough, especially considering, you know, it doesn't cost too much to get a new whole set. I mean, money's all relative. But even if yours do move freely and you're reusing, you should be taking those apart and re-lubing them with some sort of brake lubricant. That was the one where somebody online recommended a silicone-based lubricant as opposed to like a grease-based. But anyway, so that's about it. I'm going to be, I'll put this on. It's just going to use those two 17mm bolts, reusing. This caliper came with all new hardware except for those two bolts, so you are going to have to reuse those, so make sure you don't throw those out or give them back, like with if you have a core charge. And I already gave mine back, so but I have my 17mm bolts. I'll use this to mount it. These two pieces are going to have to come apart. It comes assembled, at least what I did. So I'm going to have to take these two bolts off. I think those are 14s. At least they were on the old ones. I don't know if the new ones. Sometimes they change, so don't be surprised if you have a different size when you go to do the new ones. These top bolts will have to come out so that the two pieces could separate, so I could get the brake pads into the mounting bracket. They're a little tricky to get undone when it's just loose. So on the first one I actually had to mount it with the two mounts and then break them free, and once they're broken free they came right off. And I was able to actually put the brake pads in with the mounting bracket right on the hole, mounted onto the car. It's a little tricky, but I was able to do it. I find it tricky to put the new pads in whether it's on the car or not, so I don't know, just probably me, but takes me probably usually at least 10 or 15 minutes to get each set in. And that's about it. So this is just going to mount on and go over. I'll connect those two 17s, and then I'll unbolt those to take the two pieces apart, put the brake pads into the mounting bracket, and then put the caliper assembly back over it, reconnect it. Don't forget to grease the back of your brake pads, the new ones, with some brake grease. And when I put these bolts back in, and probably the 17s as well, I use thread locker blue, the blue version, which is made to break free, but it won't vibrate loose. I've had brakes in the past, you know, in the day or two after I've done them, when I didn't use that stuff, they ended up vibrating loose on the highway. So ever since I've been using the blue thread locker, I've never had a problem with that again, and they always come free when I go to work on them the next time. All right, be back. All right, so just about done here. I've mounted the mounting bracket first with those two 17mm bolts. That was without the caliper itself on, and then once that was on, I compressed the two guide pin. You could see those are pretty squished in right there, and the only reason I had to do that was the only way I was going to be able to get the caliper on. It's got a slide over your brake pads, so now I have the brake pads in there, put grease on the back of them, then slid the caliper over the top, and then you have to line up, you know, where those two bolts I removed that go into the guide pins go. So I'm gonna go ahead and line those up, put those in. I'll put the blue thread locker stuff onto those two bolts there, put those in, and then after that I'll be able to connect up the brake hose again and the Banjo Bolt with the washers, and then let the fluid flow in. Once you do that and have the fluid flowing, you could do I think they call it like a gravity bleed. But basically, once you connect it up, as long as you have the bleeder valve opened up and you just leave it for a few minutes, it doesn't take long. Just gravity will pull the brake fluid down the hose, and it's a pretty big reservoir inside the caliper that's got to fill up. So, make sure you have enough brake fluid in your reservoir up in the engine compartment before you start filling that up. You don't want to have that run dry while you're trying to fill stuff. I mean, I don't think it'd be a problem on one caliper, but just make sure it's topped off when you start to bleed and fill the caliper. And eventually you'll see the fluid start running out. As long as you have the bleeder valve opened up, it'll start dribbling out. Then you could close it, get everything kind of, make sure everything's bolted down tight, and then get a partner to bleed the brakes by pressing on the brake pedal as you undo the bleeder valve, unscrew it to open it up, and then have something to catch the fluid as it comes out, and then tighten it back up as they ease off the pedal so it doesn't suck in air after they push on it. And you just keep doing that until you get all the air bubbles out. Probably a good idea to bleed through as much of the fluid as you can to get as much fresh fluid in the system as you can. And that's about it. I'll come back if I have anything else to add. Like I said probably at the beginning, this wasn't really meant to be a full-out brake tutorial, but just kind of apply, what's specific to the Scion, to help you with that. And then you could watch probably any brake change video for any other car and put the two together and do what you need to do. Definitely not hard. But if you don't do them very often, which I don't, it's kind of like doing them the first time each time. All right, I'll be back, maybe. All right, one thing I just want to show really quick, hopefully before I run out of memory, is that's the Banjo Bolt. Hopefully that focuses. Notice the washers on either side of the fitting, and you'll see that little pin at the bottom. That's got to go in the hole, so that just helps it to line up properly and stay positioned. So if you're wondering what that little, by the way, you'll notice that my gravity bleed has gone through. So I could go ahead and close that off, and then I'll pump the brakes to clear out any air. But anyway, I just wanted to show how that banjo fitting goes back in. All right, all done. Everything's put back together. I just got back from a test drive. A long test drive, and everything is working just great. There you see it. Just where I got my parts. My rotors came from AutoZone. I got their slightly better ones, which were about $40 a piece. They're coated in this black stuff that's supposed to prevent rust. Hopefully it works, because I hate it when they rust overnight practically, with like a surface rust, the aftermarket ones. And the calipers came from Advance Auto. I think they were $65 a piece, complete, remanufactured. And there's a $30 core charge. You got to bring your old ones back and get that back. All right, if you have any questions, feel free to ask. Like I said, I'm not an expert, but I get by. Talk to you later. Good luck on your job.